Okay, yes, transport system in humans, learning outcomes, main blood vessels in the body. So remember, yeah, three main blood vessels. We have our arteries, okay, we have our capillaries, and we have our veins. Can? Next one is the role of blood and its components. So we know that blood is involved in the transport of oxygen, okay, and as well as the transport of dissolved carbon dioxide in our blood, and to also transport substances like glucose and amino acids to our cells and tissues, okay. And of course, the blood is involved in our immune system, okay. And the components of blood, please remember, we have plasma, the liquid portion, we have red blood cells, we have white blood cells, and we have platelets. Yeah, blood groups and their compatibilities, okay. So we know that there is the O, A, and B. Yeah, and you need to understand about the compatibility of blood types. Okay, linking back to the main blood vessels, okay, you need to know the structure and the function of arteries, capillaries, and veins, okay, and how materials and substances are being transferred and transported from the capillary and then into the tissue fluid and then eventually to the cells. Okay, basically it is movement of substances. So we are talking mainly about diffusion. Okay, next you need to know all the structure and the function of the heart. Okay, so please know how to label, right, your aorta, pulmonary artery, your vena cava, and your pulmonary vein. Need to know how to label left, right, left side, and then right side. You need to know how to label your atrium and your ventricle. Yeah, and then you need to know the flow of blood. Yeah, then you need to know about cardiac cycle and of course coronary heart disease. Okay, as with biology, especially for your structured questions, please be very aware that these are the keywords that you should try to include in your answers as much as possible. Okay, so oxygenated, deoxygenated blood, insoluble, coagulation, clot, universal donor, universal recipient. Okay, then tissue rejection, antibody, neutralizers, antigen agglutination, biconcave bell shape. This describes the shape of the red blood cells. Okay, next, arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Okay, so arteries, then they will branch into smaller arterioles and then eventually branch into capillaries. Capillaries will eventually bunch up into slightly larger venules, and then venules will bunch up into veins. Yeah. Next is tissue fluid, 1 cell thick, and then we have blood pressure, blood flow, atrioventricular, universe, systole, and diastole. Okay, and then you have coronary arteriosclerosis, fatty deposit, and lumen. Okay, so these are your different keywords relevant for your. Yeah. Okay, I am just going to admit Najiha first. Let me just admit her. Okay, I already have prepared stuff for Najiha to do. Okay, so you just hold on. I will explain what's going to happen. We don't have much time anyway because you all will go for booker time in like 30 minutes time. Okay, hi Najiha. Najiha, I've already prepared a lot of things for you today. Okay, so we have 30 minutes until booker time. Can you tell me, Najiha, for QA, do you want to spend the time to watch like a long-ish lecture, or are you kind of okay with qualitative analysis content? The lecture will like kind of really go through QA, or if you're kind of okay, I will actually assign you to do work already.
I'm not sure because like the only like for QA, like the only things I've done is like actual practical and like not like questions.
Understand. Okay, so that means you are learning QA for practical. In that case, right, Najiha, I think it will be beneficial for you today to watch the QA lecture video first. Is that okay?
Okay.
Because if you have a solid understanding of all the QA principles, right, it becomes very easy for, very easy, it will become a lot more manageable for you to do QA practical. Can?
Okay.
Okay, so for the both of you, right, I haven't taken you through about the cheat sheet that I talked about in the tutorials and whatnot. Okay, this cheat sheet is basically a system to memorize the different tests and the results. Okay, now Najiha, the QA lecture is 48 minutes long. obviously you will not be able to finish it by the time we go for Booker at 7:15. Okay, I will release you all at 7:15. So that means for today, I will not get you to do QA questions, but rather we focus on like you watching the QA lecture in total, in full, make any notes that you need to. Then once you're done with that, I will just say some things and then we will move on to physics about thermal physics. Is that fine?
Okay.
Okay, this is the thing, yeah, because I don't want to split the both of you. Najiha, you can just I don't know how you're going to be able to do this. Okay, try this out. Are you able to mute me? Are you able to mute me? I need to like run through with Zuhair the bio stuff.
No,
Are
I
you able-
can't. I don't think I can mute you.
I think you muted yourself. I don't know.
Huh?
As long as you cannot hear me. Okay, you muted yourself. I don't think you can mute me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Najwa, I think I will have to put you in a separate Google Meet. But can you just start with the QA
Yeah.
lecture? Okay, and then yeah, just start now. You can leave this meeting later on. I will tell you what to join. Okay, but you just start with the lecture now.
Okay.
You're up to 7:15. Yeah, I'll check back with you in a bit. Okay, you
Okay.
can, then I'll continue with you. Okay, I'll see you in a bit.
Okay.
I will remove you from the yeah, okay, can. Right, sorry. Yes, come let us continue again. Transport system. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a minute. I just want you to read through this on your own. And then once you have read everything, you will let me know. I will continue on from there.
Do I copy it down?
Okay, can I move on?
Yeah. Can.
You are muted, so I can't
Huh?
hear you for some reason. Are you muted?
Hello?
I can't hear you. But never mind, it's okay. As long as you can hear me. I'll just continue on, okay? As long as you can hear me. All right, so main blood vessels in the body. Okay, so let's start with the heart
I
first.
don't know Spanish one.
The heart is connected to obviously all our different organs. Yeah. So know that the main artery, yeah, from the heart to the rest of the body is your aorta. Okay. From the aorta, then it will branch into specific arteries, okay, such as your hepatic artery to the liver, right, or your renal artery to the kidney. But the main artery from the heart to the rest of the body is your aorta. Likewise, the main vein from the rest of your body back to the heart is the vena cava. Okay, the word pulmonary here, okay, describes from the lungs. Okay, so from the lungs back to the heart is your pulmonary vein, and then from your heart to the lungs would be your pulmonary artery. Okay, so please take note of these words here: pulmonary, hepatic, and renal, and know which organs they are associated with. Okay, oops. Then we have, look here, this pro tip. Blood from the stomach and intestines do not go back to the heart directly through the veins because it will have to pass through the liver first, yeah? And the stomach and intestines connected to the liver is the hepatic portal vein. Okay, so role of blood, as I've mentioned, we have four main components. We have the plasma, liquid component, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Yeah. So plasma, 55% of blood, is actually made 95% of water. And what does its function? It carries dissolved substances in the blood, such as glucose, amino acids, mineral salts, carbon dioxide, waste, hormones, plasma proteins. Red blood cells, okay, as we know, biconcave in shape. It doesn't have a nucleus. It has a hemoglobin, right? And it is actually elastic. It can bend and it can squeeze into tiny, tiny capillaries. So red blood cells bind reversibly to hemoglobin in red blood cells and is carried around the body. When blood passes through oxygen poor areas, oxygen dissociates from hemoglobin. So the oxygen that is bind with the hemoglobin will dissociate from it, and then the oxygen will diffuse into the body cells. Okay. So in terms of its adaptations, red blood cells are biconcave in shape, lacks a nucleus, and it is flexible, okay, in order to basically carry out these different, the adaptations are to basically increase surface area to volume ratio and space, okay. White blood cells, there are two types, phagocytes and your lymphocytes. Phagocytes associated with like a spiky-ish kind of appearance, okay, and with this kind of like tendrils. Lymphocytes, it looks like a sunny side up egg. So sometimes you might have questions that ask you to identify what are phagocytes, what are lymphocytes. Need to know. Okay, so in terms of phagocytosis, there is a process when phagocytes will engulf, so literally like hug foreign particles and will destroy them. Whereas lymphocytes will produce antibodies, important, yeah, for the infections and diseases chapter, produce antibodies which causes pathogens to clump together, promoting phagocytosis. Yeah, and lymphocytes will bind to and neutralize harmful toxins that pathogens produce. However, lymphocytes will also produce antibodies against a transplanted organ because it's a foreign body, right? So it will try to reject it, okay, and produce antibodies in order to destroy it. Platelets, it's not cells, okay? Platelets are basically membrane-bound bodies. They are not considered cells. What does it do? It promotes blood clotting at the site of injury, sealing the wound to prevent loss of blood and preventing the entry of harmful microorganisms. Okay, so yeah, plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and your platelets. Okay, now this one here is also important because this is how blood clots are formed. When blood vessels are damaged, platelets are activated, which trigger the conversion of soluble fibrinogen into soluble fibrin threads. These fibrin threads, they are long and they are insoluble, so they will trap the red blood cells, okay, forming a clot at the site of injury. Why is it that we must have clots when there's wounds and injuries? In order to prevent excessive loss of blood. Okay, so blood groups and their compatibilities, I've mentioned O, A, B, but you also need to know that there's also A, B blood type. Yeah, so in terms of the antibodies in our plasma, A would have anti-B, B has anti-A, AB none, O both anti-A and anti-B. Okay, the antibodies in the plasma. Antigens on the red blood cells is A antigen, that's why it's called A blood group. Okay, B antigen, AB, both A and B antigens, and O, none. So in terms of who can donate to this group of this blood group, A and O. For B, B and O. For AB, everyone. A, B, AB, and O. Right, so AB can donate. A, B blood type, okay, can receive blood from A, B, AB, and O. O can can only receive, right? O can only donate to O. But O is known as the universal donor. As you can see, they can donate to everyone. Okay, so this one is important. Body will naturally produce antibodies of other blood types, okay, except against its own red blood cells antigens. Otherwise, we will literally, be fatal because it will kill its own red blood cells. So if you transfer blood into a recipient who does not have antibodies against the donor's blood type, the transfusion will be safe. Yeah. So AB is a universal acceptor, can receive from all but can only donate to AB. O is the universal donor, can donate to all but can only receive from O only. Okay, this part here, structural function of arteries, capillaries, and veins should be pretty easy. Okay, please know that we can describe the arteries to have thick, elastic, and muscular walls, okay, to withstand high blood pressure exerted by the heart. Yeah, and there are these other functions. This one I wouldn't run through, should be pretty easy to understand. Capillaries, they are one cell thick, very, very thin, very, very small. Yeah, because it's only one cell thick. And this makes diffusion happen very, very quickly. It will increase the diffusion rate because the diffusion distance is very short. Yeah. And then capillaries are branched repeatedly. So this will increase surface area to volume ratio. Okay, whereas for veins, they have valves to prevent the backflow of blood. Yeah, they have thin, elastic, and muscular walls because the blood pressure in veins tend to be lower. Yeah. Okay, this is a graph to show blood pressure against location. As you can see, highest pressure in arteries, lowest pressure in veins. Okay, so please remember, arteries branch into arterioles and then eventually branch into capillaries. Capillaries will bunch up back into venules, which will then bunch up back into veins. Okay, so I'm running quite quickly because I don't want to take too long. Next one, about transfer of materials. Yeah, so you imagine here that this is your capillary. Yeah, the tube here is your capillary, and it is surrounded by tissue fluid and surrounding cells. Remember, what do cells need? We have just learned it, right? Aerobic respiration. It requires what? It requires oxygen and it requires glucose for respiration to occur. And respiration has to occur at all times because we need energy to be released, yeah, for our day-to-day activities. So capillaries have to bring digested nutrients and oxygen to the cells, right? And when it is in the capillary, they will diffuse from the blood plasma into the tissue fluid. Yeah, then when it's inside the tissue fluid, the substances will then diffuse into the cells. Okay, this is about nutrients, okay, and oxygen. Then any waste products and carbon dioxide that is in the tissue fluid, that's in the cells, would diffuse into the tissue fluid first, and then from tissue fluid into the capillaries, into the blood plasma. Okay, this is different from your alveoli stuff. Yeah, this one is capillary into your tissue fluid and cells. Whereas what I was talking about is about the gaseous exchange in the lungs specifically. Yeah, that one is slightly different. Okay, then you have here the structure and function of heart. So on your graph, on your page, our right hand side on the page is actually left. Yeah, and then our left hand side is actually the right hand side. So as you can see here, this on our right is left, this here on our left is right. Okay, and then yeah, please know that this lobe over here is the aorta. Okay, know how to label. And then on the same side as the aorta would have your pulmonary vein, the vein transporting oxygenated blood from the lungs back into the heart. Then on the other side would be the opposite, vena cava, and then pulmonary artery, meaning to say from the heart, pump blood into the lungs. So why is it pumping blood from the heart to the lungs? Because it is deoxygenated blood. It needs to get rid of the carbon dioxide and it needs to absorb oxygen from the lungs. Okay, please note that there's the median septum over here, and also please note that on the left hand side, right? Okay, this side here is more muscular because it needs to exert more pressure. Yeah, more pressure and more force has to be exerted on the left ventricle because it has to pump blood from the left ventricle into the aorta through all our organs. So it will have to travel a further distance. That's why you have to be a lot more forceful. So this side here is more muscular, okay, to exert more force. Okay, so all this, I believe you should be quite okay. Later when I send you the notes or before you try out questions, you can just recap on your own if you need to. Okay, so then you see here the pressure. Okay, so ventricular systole is basically when it is being pumped. Yeah, so high pressure in the left ventricle, the red over here. That means it's being squeezed. Okay, so blood is being squeezed out of the ventricle. Okay, this one is a bit complex, yeah. So this one, if you need to clarify later on, you let me know. Okay, so systole is contraction, diastole is relaxation. So ventricular systole is when the ventricle squeeze. Yeah, yeah. That's why it is red over here. Red left ventricle systole, it squeezes. Okay, and then it will very rapidly decrease in pressure. Squeeze, then it will kind of like relax. So then the pressure would immediately decrease. Okay, this one you can perhaps recap on your own. It's a bit more technical, this part about systole and diastole. But just as a bit of a reminder, whenever ventricles contract or ventricles relax, valves would either have to be open or closed. Whatever it is, we have to ensure the unidirectional flow of blood, okay, to prevent the backflow of blood. So certain valves has to open to allow blood to flow through. The valves at the back have to close to prevent any backflow of blood. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Then lastly, we have coronary heart disease. What is it? Arteriosclerosis. When fatty deposits accumulate on the inner walls of our arteries, narrowing the lumen. So at first, our arteries, okay, they have the space, but when fatty deposits accumulate inside, the lumen, the space in between is very small. Okay, coronary artery is basically the artery connecting from the aorta into the heart muscles itself. And our heart muscles is beating all the time. So it demands a lot of oxygen and it demands a lot of nutrients. Okay, so if there is a blockage in the coronary artery, that's very like not good, right? Because it can actually rupture the coronary artery. Okay, it can actually kind of like rupture, meaning to say break a little bit. A blood clot could form and it can block the artery. And if there's a blockage, blood with oxygen and nutrients cannot reach the heart muscles for them to release energy via aerobic respiration. And then the heart muscles will eventually die, they will atrophy, and then it will cause a heart attack because the heart muscles cannot pump it cannot pump, it contract, relax, the heart will not pump, resulting in a heart attack. So what are some preventative measures? Diet low in saturated fats and cholesterol, and also to not smoke, because carbon monoxide damages the inner layer of our blood vessels and it will increase the rate of fatty deposits. Okay. Another substance in cigarettes, nicotine. Nicotine stimulates adrenaline release, which will increase blood pressure, which will also increase the rate of fatty deposits accumulating, okay, in our blood vessels. Another thing, stress management, and of course, regular exercise. Yeah, so the opposite of having regular exercise is leading a very sedentary lifestyle. Okay, so okay, yeah, so this video is going to run through transfer of thermal energy. Yeah, like what I've mentioned, three main mechanisms, three methods of heat transfer, namely conduction, convection, and radiation. But the key principle here is that thermal energy will always be transferred from a region of higher temperature to a region of lower temperature. Okay. Now, one more thing that is also important, the temperature of substances and objects is not related on, or we don't say that is related to the amount of thermal energy. Okay, remember, temperature in physics and in chemistry, we associate it with the amount of kinetic energy, even though I know it's a bit counterintuitive. Okay, so the temperature of a substance would tell us how much kinetic energy it possesses. Yeah, whereas thermal energy is basically heat, yeah, that can be transferred from a region of higher temperature to a region of lower temperature. Okay, the first mechanism here, conduction. Conduction mostly occurs in solids, okay? For example, in metals like iron and copper. And conduction is the process of heat transfer that occurs between atoms or particles that are vibrating about their fixed position. Because if you remember in kinetic particle theory, how do I describe the motion of substances in the solid state? They vibrate in their fixed position. Okay, so when for example, one end of a metal rod is being heated, the particles at that end will gain energy and they will start to vibrate faster. Yeah, gain energy and the kinetic energy also increase, so they vibrate faster. As they are vibrating faster, they will then collide with the less energetic neighboring particles, causing them to vibrate faster. Yeah, so remember, is always linking back to the amount of kinetic energy, yeah, the vibration. So through the vibrations of the particles, heat energy is transferred from the hotter end of the rod to the colder end until an equilibrium temperature is attained. What this means is that until the whole entire rod is a uniform temperature, okay, an equilibrium temperature. So there's not one end that is colder or hotter than the other. So if you're talking about conduction, then of course we have to talk about the type of materials that will be good and poor conductors of heat. Okay, so a material that is a good conductor, okay, would have a high thermal conductivity. Okay, a material with a high value of thermal conductivity will be a better conductor of heat. So we know that metals, they are better conductors of heat compared to other materials such as wood, okay, and air, because metals have a higher thermal conductivity. So the key point here is just the terminology that we are using, thermal conductivity. Okay, then solids like metals are good conductors of electricity as well as heat, because they also have free electrons that move relatively, let me just edit that. Oops. Free electrons that move relatively easily in the metal itself. Okay, so I know that you don't take pure chemistry, but basically basically in metals, right, the structure of metal solids especially is just like very tightly packed, very closely packed metal atoms, okay, and then around and within the metal atoms itself, the layers, there will be a sea of delocalized electrons. This sea of electrons is literally just electrons swimming around nearby the metal. Okay, so electrons are charged particles, so they can also conduct electricity as well as heat. Then the free electrons, they move at very high speed and they carry kinetic energy and will again collide with neighboring atoms or molecules, thereby transferring the energy. That's why metals are better conductors of heat compared to non-metals. And again, they have a higher thermal conductivity. Okay, so applications of conductors, we have to think about in what cases do we need to use good conductors, and in what cases do we want to use like poor conductors of heat. So this is a primary school example, yeah. Fluffy winter clothes, like for example, a very puffy jacket with like, down feathers or like, kind of very puffy material. They are good to keep us warm in winter time because it traps a layer of air. Yeah, and it reduces the amount of heat loss to the cold environment because air is a poor conductor of heat. Whereas in certain cases, we want to have, okay, very efficient conduction of heat. For example, in cooking utensils and saucepans, right? When we want to cook food, we're going to very quickly heat it up, okay, and maybe get it to a very high temperature. So we use metals like aluminum and stainless steel. They heat up very easily. Okay, and then wood is another insulating material, okay, and it is a good material to use for the handles of saucepans and cooking utensils because they are poor conductors of heat, so it will not heat up easily. So when we do hold the handles, our hands, our skin will not get burnt. Very simple. Okay. Next one, convection. Convection occurs in fluids such as air or water. Okay, the key word here being fluids. Fluids. And the reason why we are only talking about fluids for convection is because the fluids need to be able to move either within the liquid or in all directions in the case of gases. Okay, and what is the principle of convection? Hot fluid expands, lesser density, and then it will rise. Cooler fluids, in comparison, will be relatively denser, and then it will basically sink down to the bottom. Okay, and when this happens, rise and fall, this is basically setting up it will repeat itself continually, and this sets up a convection current in the fluid. Okay, so the process of heat transfer from one region to another through the movement of heated particles from bottom to top, this is convection. Convection cannot occur in solids because the particles are in fixed positions and cannot move freely. Okay, so how do we apply convection? The heating coil of an electric kettle is placed at the bottom rather than at the top, because we want the bottom to be heated, expand, density decrease, and then it will float up. Okay, so the direction also matters. Heat at the bottom, cool at the top. Why then are air conditioners always installed at the top of our rooms? Because at the top, they will cool the air at the top. The colder air at the top will sink at the bottom. The warmer air at the bottom will then float up, okay, taking its place. So then the convection current is top down, but basically the direction, the convection current is still the same. Okay. Next one is radiation. The key difference for radiation between the other two is that radiation does not require a medium, whereas conduction and convection requires a medium. It is a requirement. We must have a medium, otherwise cannot conduct, cannot transfer thermal energy via convection. Okay, so if you have a vacuum, like for example outer space from the sun, outer space to the earth, we can only depend on radiation. Okay, so radiation is a process whereby thermal energy is transmitted in the form of infrared radiation, okay, which is a type of electromagnetic wave. For example, is the heat from the sun, right, which travels through a vacuum of gas. So what are the factors that will affect the rate of radiation and the rate of emitting and absorbing radiation? It's very simple. 3 different factors: the type of surface, the surface temperature, and the surface area. Okay, when I talk about the type of surface, we are talking about 2 different aspects: the color, whether it is a dark color or a light color, okay, and the texture, whether it is a smooth surface or if it's a rough and bumpy surface. Okay, so darker colors like, gray, like dark grays to even black, they are good absorbers and good emitters of radiation. Whereas bright colors like white, perhaps also maybe even silver, okay, they are poor emitters and poor absorbers of radiation. Rough textured surface, good absorber, good emitter. Smooth surface, poor absorber, poor emitter. Okay, surface temperature, okay, is also going to affect the rate of radiation. I think this one's pretty easy to understand. Surface area, also important. Okay, yeah, so usually the questions are usually set based on color and texture, but do also note that surface temperature and surface area will also affect the rate, okay, of emitting and absorbing radiation. So applications of radiation. Okay, when it is a hot day, we should try to wear clothes of brighter colors instead of dull and dark colors, because bright colors are poor absorbers of radiation. So then we will not get as much radiation very close to our skin. Okay, so then it will be more cooling. And then if you look at the back of your refrigerator in the kitchen, you would notice that there are these things called cooling fans. Okay, these cooling fans are there in order to basically emit, okay, any heat that needs to be very quickly released, because the refrigerator has, or at least the contents of the fridge, the inside of the refrigerator, in our chiller, in our freezer, they have to be cool, right, in order to keep the temperature of the things inside cool. So any heat that is being absorbed by the surroundings or any heat inside has to be basically emitted away. Yeah, so that's the function of the cooling fins. The cooling fins are painted black because black is a good emitter of radiation. Okay, so then it will be more heat will be lost by radiation. Okay, so for for this chapter, right, is either they test you on the different factors that will affect the rate of conduction, convection, or radiation, or they might ask you to explain how does a certain object, okay, work in terms of either heating up something very quickly or preventing and reducing heat loss. Okay, and a very common object that they like to ask about is actually the vacuum flask. Okay, so a vacuum flask is a specially designed flask whereby if you put hot water inside, okay, and close it, a few hours later, it will still be hot and warm. Okay, so it is designed to reduce the heat loss to the surroundings. Okay, heat loss by conduction and convection is reduced because there is actually a vacuum layer. Okay, a double glass wall. So it's made of glass, which is a poor conductor of heat, and two glass walls, and they suck out all the air between the two glass walls. So because there's no medium, there's not even air in between the double glass walls. Any heat that is being absorbed by the glass walls have nowhere to transfer or to be transferred to, because in between the glass walls is vacuum, and conduction convection cannot take place in a vacuum. Okay, but if you say, well, radiation can still take place, right? True, but then they are also preventing heat loss by radiation because the surface of the vacuum flask is made out of a poor emitter, shiny inner surface of the vacuum flask. It is a good reflector and a poorer emitter of radiation. So any radiation, it will just reflect away and it will not emit any radiation itself. Okay, so yeah, be familiar with your vacuum flask. It's quite a common object we like to test on. Okay, so now I want you to look at your assessment book, and can you tell me, are there any other objects that they break down? Did they mention anything about a fridge, anything about a kettle, anything about what do they like to ask? Roof of a building. Sometimes they like to also ask about that. Your assessment book, what examples did they give?
For mm, for conduction, they gave just the candle and the rod. Then the one that got paper clip also.
Mm, mm. The one about the paper clip attached to the wax, right?
Yeah.
And then this one, yeah, very, very standard question. Convection, usually about fluid lah, right? So either about air or water.
Yeah. They show like the experiment setup with like a Bunsen burner and all.
Mm.
Then mm, like in a ice cup also, like with ice cubes.
Oh, that's interesting. What did they ask about the ice cubes? Is it why ice cubes?
It's like a colored ice cube showing the convection current in the water.
Ah, okay. That is actually yeah, less commonly asked. But the ice cube itself is colored, is it?
Yeah.
So what you okay, later you read that on your own, but as a very quick kind of discussion on that, the ice cubes are colored. The ice cubes itself is frozen water molecules with some pigment and dye stuck inside. So as the ice cube starts to melt, right, we would see that there's the diffusion, right, of the ink.
Mhm.
Now, when the ice cube melt, it is still I would say a slightly lower temperature than the rest of the liquid, right? Lower temperature, therefore it is relatively denser, so then it will sink to the bottom, right? So something that we notice, the ink will kind of like sink down and then slowly start to kind of diffuse throughout the liquid. Can you read out loud what is the question and what is the solution for that particular example?
It's not like a question, it's just a what you call like explanation. It
Okay,
says
can you read the explanation?
the A colored ice cube is added to a beaker of water. The cold ice gains internal energy and melts, causing the water around the ice cube to cool. Then the water around the ice and from the melted ice is cold. Particles at a lower temperature move about with less velocity and are closer together. The color water has a higher density compared to the water around it and it will sink.
Yeah.
The warmer water will move in to take the place of the cold water, becoming chilled by the ice cube. The process repeats until the whole fluid is cool.
Yes. Yeah. So that one, I would say that the explanation is a lot more kind of detailed. Yeah. They use the term internal energy, right? And this is a concept that we had kind of went through, I think, the previous lesson, right? If you remember, internal energy is the sum of the kinetic energy that the substance or the object possesses, as well as the potential energy. Yeah. So yeah. Yes. Any other examples beside the ice cubes?
A power station with large cooling towers.
And is there anything special about those large cooling towers? Is it painted in a specific
To
color?
condense steam from the turbine.
Okay.
Like it just shows details in the examples.
Okay. Anything else?
No, after that is radiation.
Okay. Then radiation. Yeah, it's basically, again, right? It's just the texture, is the color, is the texture of the surface area, surface temperature, right? Any examples that they have provided for radiation besides the clothes?
It's like an experiment setup that investigates the infrared emission of different types of surfaces.
Yeah. So whenever they mention rate of, just bear in mind, rate means something happening per unit time. Okay, so they're always measuring a process over a period of time, then they calculate the rate. Okay, so since in school you're kind of wrapping this up, what is the next chapter that is in the assessment book? It should be waves already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gen-
waves. Yeah, waves is actually a very straightforward and simple, but there's a lot of terminologies that we need to kind of learn. Okay, so hopefully when you get to waves, we will be able to slowly work our way to clarify the concepts. Okay, right. It is 9 already, so I'll just end here. Okay, so today we didn't do much questions. Perhaps next week